Hi, I'm Kari. I'm the winemaker for Cornerstone Cellars. Today we're going to be talking about the Cabernet Franc, and in particular we're talking about our Cabernet Franc that comes from this beautiful Oakville Station vineyard. I'm just going to give you a little swing around. You can see we've got the Mayacamas mountains up behind us to the west. It's the rest of our block. We're in the Cabernet Franc block in the vineyard. And you see it's a beautiful day. We've got great canopy starting here. The shoot growth is really pretty consistent and pretty even, which makes for a really nice even crop later on in the season. And where we are today in the vineyard, as far as growth wise, is we've just come through flowering, and you can see we've got little tiny grapes on the clusters. And so the vineyard crew has come through and they've taken a pass and they have done some suckering, which is taking off all these little pieces of the plant that is growing that doesn't support the growth of the grapes. Oh, there's little Coco. Hi, Coco. She's checking things out too. And so they've made one pass already, but here we can see that there's still suckering that needs to be done. And these are little pieces of the vine that the vine's actually spending energy on. And when we really want to spend its energy on ripening the grapes and having the canopy grow good and steady. So we're going to go into the cellar and we're going to taste a couple of wines. I've got 3 vintages that I want to taste. I'm going to do the Cabernet Franc from the Oakville Station 2013 vintage, the 2014 vintage, and the 2015 vintage. So after spending a little time in the vineyard this morning, we were out in the Oakville Station in Oakville, right in the heart of Napa Valley. And in the Oakville Station, we have 3 varietals that we grow there that the University of Davis grows for us out there. And one of them is Cabernet Sauvignon, one of them is Merlot, and the 3rd varietal is Cabernet Franc. And today we're talking about Cabernet Franc. And we were out in the vineyard today. We were looking to see how the vines are coming along. That happens to be, in my opinion, one of the really great places to grow Cabernet Franc in the valley. There's not a lot of it planted. It's one of those varietals that is very particular about the soil and about the climate. It needs some heat in order to get fully ripened. And I think sometimes people say, you know, I'm not so sure about Cabernet Franc. It's because depending on where it's grown, it might not get as ripe as it should. It might have some of that bell pepper character that some people don't care for. Some people like it. But the Oakville Station is right there in a spot that has well-drained soil. It is on the valley floor, but it's right towards the rise and the Mayacamas hillside. So it's a perfect place for us. The University of California, Davis planted those vines in 1990. So they've been around for a little while. We've been sourcing fruit from them for many, many years. And they meticulously farm it. So we originally sourced that fruit to be part of a blend. So in the Bordeaux, Cabernet Franc is one of the 5 blending varietals there, along with Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cab Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. So we did originally purchase it for that. And it turns out every single year, we just pull a few barrels aside because it's just so darn delicious on its own. So we bottle it as a single varietal, Cabernet Franc, which is what we're going to be tasting here today. We went back into the cellar, or into the library actually, and we found a few cases from a couple of vintages, and we thought we'd put them together and give our customers an opportunity to try 3 different vintages. So what I have today is the 2013 Cabernet Franc, and it's 100% Cabernet Franc, and the 2014 Cab Franc, which is also 100% Cabernet Franc, and then the 15 actually has a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon and a little bit of Merlot blended into it, also from the Oakville Station. So they're all 100% from Oakville, and I think it's interesting to try them all side by side. They come from the same block, and really what you'll taste, if you taste vintage to vintage, is the difference. That is the one thing that really does impact the wine and make them be a little bit different from each other. But on the other hand, I have a feeling that there is a continuous thread that you'll know that it's Cabernet Franc. It has those characteristics, but it's the vintage that makes a difference. So that's the 2013. And people often ask, how long do the wines age? And there's no magic formula for that. I can't tell you exactly how long wines will age. It depends on your preference. Do you like your wines a little bit on the younger side? Do you like them with a little bit of bottle age? 5 years, 6 years? And do you like them in for the long haul? Would you, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? We have gone back and tasted some wines that we've bottled over 10 years ago, and they're still beautiful. There's plenty of tannin and backbone in there. They do age beautifully. I happen to know from my preference, my palate, I like mine a little bit on the younger side. I like them a little more fruit forward. I like a little more vibrancy, although I really appreciate a well-aged wine. There's some complex nuances. You get a little more, there's an integration, and I don't know how you would really describe that it just feels like the wine's been put together longer, and it just feels like it's sort of coming into its own. But I like mine a little bit on the younger side with a little more oomph to them. The aromas and the flavors that I find in Cabernet Franc, while similar to Cabernet, I find this to be sort of a more charming, a little more aromatic, not as heavy-handed as Cabernet can be sometimes. I think that this has some subtle nuance in it, but there's strawberry, there's raspberry, there's a little hint of dark chocolate, which I like very much. So the 2014 vintage and the 2013 vintage were vintages that came through in drought years. So we didn't get nearly enough rainfall. The vines struggled more without as much groundwater, without as much water for the plant to uptake. The berries aren't as large. So what happens while the drought isn't good for plants in general and for people in general, what happens is the berries tend to be a little smaller, which makes for a more concentrated wine. So the 13 and the 14, we had the drought those years. Things started ripening earlier. The season kicks off earlier because we're not getting that spring rain when it's cooler and moist. And so that starts earlier. So we end up with bud break earlier, flowering earlier, veraisons earlier, and so it happens that harvest is a little earlier, which we don't ever mind. I think that's absolutely fine. We get to pick it when it's ready to pick, and not because Mother Nature is telling us that it's time to get that in off the vine. So the 13 and the 14 have beautiful concentration. The berries were very small. The juice to berry ratio was in our favor for sure. And they're similar, but they're not the same. And I think that's one of the things that's really so very interesting about wine. Wow, that is lovely. That is really, for me, for my palate, hitting its prime at 2014. It's there's a lushness to it, a ripeness to it. It has plenty of its youthful vigor, but it's starting to settle down. You can taste the tannin, but they're supple. The texture is just like a silk glove. It's just lovely. So the 2015 vintage, we had a record-setting rain through the winter months when we get most of our rain, December, January. Tons and tons of rain. So things kicked off a little later. Flowering was a little later. Veraison was a little later. We harvested a little bit later. Still beautifully ripe. It was just a later harvest date. The complexity in this is just really beautiful. Boy, there is a thread that you can tell that it's the same varietal and the same style. The wines are made in the same style coming from the same vineyard, but you can tell that there is a little bit of vineyard differentiation, and which makes this all the more interesting, I think. All of these wines, I have many things that I would pair with them. Not that all cheese goes with all wine, but I do think there are plenty of cheeses that would pair beautifully with this. I think that something that's tangy and a little salty would be a really nice complement to the fresh, fruity, lush flavors and aromas that we have. So a little feta, some camembert, something with some tartness. Some people might say even a blue cheese would go well with this, and I think this could stand up to blue cheese. So that's really up to you. It's each personal preference. But as far as pairings at the table for dinner, pork, a pork roast, pork belly, stew, I think, gosh, there's just so many things that you could do. Lamb, this would be a beautiful wine to pair with lamb. Meatballs and spaghetti sauce and a tomato sauce would be just great. So those are the 3 vintages. We have them available. They're going to be actually available in a library set, in a vertical set, the 2013, 2014, and 2015 Oakville Station Cabernet Franc. Boy, I'm super happy that I've got these open today, and I've got a pork roast in the oven. So I'm very excited to be able to try all these now with the food. Take a look, keep an eye out. We'll be offering up the 2013, 2014, 2015 package set coming up. In the meantime, find a Cab Franc and get it open, and cheers.